We're going to go through a few conceptual questions specifically relating to the magnetic force on a moving charge. So our first question here is this. What do you think here? So our correct answer is B. If you remember, the magnetic force on a charge in a magnetic field is QV crossed with B. The charge must be moving, and it must be moving perpendicularly to the magnetic field for there to be a magnetic force. So since this proton is at rest, it's not moving, there will be no magnetic force. It certainly will still create an electric field, but that does not give us a magnetic force. Here's another question. What about this one? Correct answer is B. This goes back to the cross product right-hand rule. This right-hand rule works for any equation that is a cross product. Okay, so we'll do it the author's way. Take your right hand and point your thumb in the direction of this green arrow, the velocity, the direction the charge is heading in. So if you're sitting with your screen in front of you, so your screen is oriented vertically, point your thumb towards your ceiling, towards the top of the screen, wherever the top of your screen is. Okay, our thumb goes in the direction of the first vector. Our index finger or pointer finger needs to point in the direction of the second vector, which is the magnetic field, B. So while holding your thumb still pointing towards the top of your screen, now get your pointer finger pointing to the right of the screen. So this takes some practice. Just turn your wrist. Keep your thumb in this direction and turn your wrist until your index finger points in that direction. And it might mean rotating your whole body to be able to do that. So if you have your thumb pointing towards the top of the screen and your index finger or pointer finger pointing to the right, now just bend that middle finger if it's not already bent. Bend it in the normal bending way. Our middle finger should point into the screen. And that direction represents the force. So that's why the force on this charge would be into the screen. If it were a negative charge, so side note, if Q had been negative, so same picture, but it was a negative charge moving upwards through this magnetic field, the magnetic force would have been opposite, meaning it would point out of the screen. So a positive charge and a negative charge would experience forces in opposite directions, because that Q being negative just gives us an opposite answer for the magnetic force. Here is another question. The correct answer here is E. There is no force. Now the charge is totally moving. So we have the QV part, but the velocity is parallel to B. There's no perpendicular components to multiply. For those that want to see an equation, recall that any cross product equation can be written in terms of the magnitudes of the vectors times the sine of phi, where phi is specifically the angle between the vectors. In this case, phi is 180 degrees. And sine of 180 is 0. There's no force because the motion is not perpendicular to that magnetic field. Okay, a few more questions. So first, what do you think here? The correct answer here is B. If you answered A, that's good, but that would be the direction of just the V cross B. So if we're just doing this portion for the right-hand rule, meaning thumb in the direction of V, index finger or pointer finger in the direction of B, or at least the component perpendicular to the velocity, our middle finger would point out of the page or screen. The reason why the answer is in is because this is a negative charge. So we're getting opposite of what V cross B gives us. So if it's a negative charge, we get an opposite of what we saw with the right-hand rule. Technically, you can use the left hand for the electrons if you wanted to. For negative charges, the left hand will give you the right direction. I find that sometimes a little too confusing though. So just think in terms of opposite if we have negative charges. Okay. Make this a little bigger. What about this one? Okay, the correct answer is C. This one, of course, is a little different in that they've given us the direction of the force instead of just V and B. So we just have to approach it a little bit differently. Knowing that we put our thumb in this direction and our pointer finger in this direction, and our middle finger gives us this direction, we need to start with what we know. So the way I would approach this is I would put my thumb in the direction of this velocity vector over here. So down and to the left. I don't know the direction of B, that's fine. So now what I want to do is rotate my wrist so that my middle finger is pointing out of the screen, because that's what they say right here. Out of the screen. So walk through this. Take your right hand, point your thumb down and to the left, while keeping your thumb down and to the left. Rotate your hand so that it's pointing out of the screen. When I do that, when I hold my thumb and middle fingers in these directions, thumb and middle finger, my pointer finger is pointing this way, down towards the ground and to the left. Or just kidding, that's my right. Okay, down and to the right is option A. And I said the option is C, so why would it be opposite? Well, it's opposite because this is a negative charge. Negative charge, we just have to do opposite of what our right-hand rule gave us. So the magnetic field needs to point up and to the left in order to get a force on this charge to point out of the screen. And please, if you're running into issues, set up an appointment time with me. We can walk through some of these on Zoom. Happy to do that with a big group of you if you'd like. Okay, I have one more question for you. Here is our last question for this concept. Okay, so the correct answer here is E. This one's more involved in that there is an electric force because this charge is moving through an electric field. So there is an electric force. Since this is an electron, it's negatively charged. Let's just do this. So we have a negative charge moving to the right. Well, we know it's going to be attracted to the positive charges, so it would want to turn up and head and go to the positive charges. So there's an electric force that points upwards on it. But the question wants it to be able to go through without being deflected, so not go up to the top. That means there must be a magnetic force pointing downwards to balance out that electric force. We want this electric force to equal the magnetic force that the charge will experience. Okay, right-hand rule. Magnetic force, QV cross B, this cross product. We have our thumb pointing to our right, because that's the direction the charge is moving in. Our pointer finger, or index finger, is what we're looking for. Our magnetic force needs to point, this is our middle finger, it needs to point towards the bottom of the screen in order to point to that negative plate. So thumb right, my middle finger towards the bottom of the screen. When I do that, my index finger or pointer finger points out of the screen. But again, this is an electron. Since the charge is negative, the answer is opposite. So even though my finger pointed out of the screen, I really need into the screen in order to get this electron, the force on the negative charge, an electron to point downwards. In terms of how strong the magnetic field would be, well, previous section, we found that the electric force on a charge was the charge times the electric field. We're now learning that the magnetic force is the charge times how fast the charge is moving times the magnetic field. The charge itself will cancel. The magnetic field needed to keep that charge moving in a straight line would be the strength of the electric field between those plates divided by the speed of that charge. And then the charge would experience no net force.